Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 74 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 16, the second round of the 2022 fantasy playoffs for most people, and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, we're going into the second round for us at least. Players are injured. I don't know how many playoffs I'm in as of the time of this episode releasing. We're recording before Monday Night Football. How are we feeling on this Tuesday, Waiver Wire Tuesday, and with these injuries and everything else going on throughout the fantasy football landscape?
I have a lot of leagues that are interesting. So I have the buy in one league, but we just received word that Jalen Hurts might be missing this week, which might not kill my team, but would absolutely suck for the most consistent part of my lineup. I moved on to the championship in my big 14-person league. Championship is the upcoming week. Our league, I lost. One league where next week starts the playoffs. I need Christian Watson to score 13 fantasy points tonight, and I move on to the playoffs. And the other league I was out in. So we got still alive in 2 leagues for sure next week, maybe 3. So 3 out of 5 going into pretty much the semifinals / championship week. Definitely a good year overall, honestly.
There we go. That's pretty solid. I've almost if you're a listener to this show, I mean, I've talked about it before, but last year was my best fantasy season ever, and I'm never going to have a better season. I'm really not. 2 championships, points in one league, which is basically a championship in itself. I won my spread pool. I then won the fantasy, playoff, the NFL playoff fantasy format. I'm never going to have a year like that again, where everything kind of goes right. And I'm kind of spoiled myself with that. So anyway, it's going to be fun. If it's the first time listening to us, thank you so much. We do the show on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Next week is going to be a little bit of a different schedule. Probably just going to release 2 shows during the week or something like that. I'll be home for the holidays. I don't know, Nick, if you're going away or not. But we'll still get you the fantasy content that you need. And honestly, at this point, the waiver show is so quick, and so is the Thursday Night Football show. We only really need 2 shows, but that's okay. So anyway, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday normally, plus the Sunday live show. But we are not doing a Sunday live show this week. We are doing a Saturday live show for Christmas Eve. Nick did this amazing graphic, even though Tua is playing on Sunday, but we'll talk about him. We're going to talk about all the games, and your start sits are going to matter for both Saturday and Sunday. That's how we're doing Saturday. There's 11 games on Saturday. It's basically a Sunday, and then the Sunday obviously has the 3 games as well. So it's going to be 9:30 a.m. Normally it's 8:30 on a Sunday. It's 9:30 on a Saturday. So make sure you join us for that on Christmas Eve before you go see your loved ones if you're celebrating. If not, hopefully still join us and have a good time with that. Come ask your fantasy questions. We love to help you out. We'd love to help you out and set you up for success in the second round of the fantasy football playoff. So it's going to be on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, same as it normally is. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, and Twitter is PrimeTimeFFPod. During the week, you can find our shows on all audio streaming platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you're watching the show right now, drop a like on this video. We'd appreciate that. Make sure you share those links out with your friends, with your league mates. Help us grow the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Keep connecting and interacting with us on social media, PrimeTime FFPod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. News and injury updates. This is not the segment that we want to do leading into your fantasy playoffs for week 2. It's not going to be fun, so we're going to talk about it. Jonathan Taylor was officially diagnosed with a high ankle sprain as of Tuesday morning. He is going to miss the rest of the fantasy playoffs. It seems like he hasn't been officially placed on IR yet, but the Colts are basically out of playoff contention. There's no reason for them to run Taylor out there. He hasn't even had a great season, so it's not like, he's fighting for a record or anything. He's going to be shut down. I have in my dynasty league, and I lost, I think, by 10 points. So Taylor's probably the reason that I did not advance in my dynasty league. So that sucks.
The reason you did not advance in your
so that's probably why I didn't, and that absolutely sucks. I'm still fighting for the points title in that league, but now no Jonathan Taylor. I'm 40 behind on the points. It's going to be really hard to find a running back to replace that, that upside of Jonathan Taylor. So Your thoughts about this, Nick? Obviously, it sucks. And if you have Jonathan Taylor and you did manage to advance, hopefully you have a good team around you. It didn't just get lucky with your matchup, but this is going to be rough.
My biggest question is, where does Jonathan Taylor go next year? Because he was pretty much definitively the 101 this year. People like me did argue for McCaffrey, and granted, I was right mostly because of injury. But like, I mean, it's going to be hard to justify drafting him when that offense is not high power. He's not getting enough of the volume that he did last year. He's not executing as well. That team is nowhere near the same. It's going to be a fun debate. And for the people that own him, I mean, like, you probably did lose your playoffs because of it. I mean, I lucked out in one league because my opponent their players did not perform well. Some of my other guys stepped up big, but like, for the most part, if you had Taylor, you're out. Like, it sucks. It's part of the landscape of fantasy. There's always somebody that winds up that gets hurt near the end and kind of costs the season. Like,
Yep.
It sucks. It's part of fantasy, part of the game. You just got to suck it up, and you'll have 6 months to recover before next draft.
Yep. Khalil Herbert with a hip injury is going to be designated to return from the IR this week and practice. Seems like he's going to play Saturday against the Bills. Do you think this cuts into David Montgomery's workload? It did seem like at times that Khalil Herbert was the better running back, but Montgomery's had 4 straight weeks of 14 plus fantasy points. He's looked pretty good.
Yeah, Monty's been very consistent. It's the number 1 rushing team in the league. I don't know if they still are, but they were when they had Herbert, Monty, and Fields rushing. I imagine that they're still within the top 3 at the minimum. So
yeah, probably.
Even if Herbert does eat into his workload, I'm not too worried. But of course, that does lower the ceiling. But then again, David Montgomery didn't have much of a ceiling anyway. I know he's been a fantasy stud in the championship weeks or the playoff weeks for the last 2 years. So, I mean, we'll see. He's been consistent, but I'm not too worried about David Montgomery. I think his consistency and the team's ability to run the ball have been enough for me to trust him in the playoffs.
I agree. Here's a big one. Jalen Hurts has a shoulder injury. It's his right throwing shoulder. I saw a report that was not considered serious, but he's uncertain to play versus the Cowboys this week. I mean, this is basically the quarterback 1 on the year, I believe. There's 37 fantasy points, and if you had Jonathan Taylor and Jalen Hurts, he probably gave you that chance to win your matchup, whether you won it or not. So, I don't know when we're going to get an update on this shoulder. He clearly played through it, so I don't know how serious it is. I don't know how sore it is. I don't know how it's going to affect him, but the Cowboys is a tough matchup. I want to see how he did against the Cowboys earlier in the season. I know the Eagles won, but Jalen Hurts against the Cowboys had 16 fantasy points, which is his lowest of the entire season. His second lowest is 20, so that's the only. Oh, I'm sorry. His lowest is actually against Jacksonville. So his second lowest of the season against the Cowboys, that was week 6. I think we found our all bust quarterback if he is going to play. I don't think we can bust him this week because we're going to have to record Wednesday. But anyway, your thoughts on this injury, and not just how it affects, if you have Jalen Hurts with this injury, you need to go pick up a backup quarterback. But more so, what?
100%.
Oh, yeah. More so, how does this affect Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Miles Sanders, Dallas Goedert, who could potentially return?
Oh, brother, that is a rough one. I mean, it's not a must-win for the Eagles, but they do clinch the division with a win over Dallas. So I guess you could argue it's a must-win. This sucks. Jalen Hurts has not scored under 20 fantasy points in a game since his bye week. The game before that was Dallas. So Jalen Hurts has been an absolute tank. You don't need to rave about him enough. He's a QB1 in fantasy on the season. There's not much more you need to say about the guy. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, like, it is going to be absolutely brutal, and you do need to roster a quarterback. So thank goodness you came for the waiver wire week, because it's a big one.
Yep. It sucks. If I do end up advancing in my 13-1 league, again, I need the Green Bay defense to score less than 10 points. Jalen Hurts is my quarterback. I don't think I have a backup. I think I may have dropped my backup. Let's see. I don't have a backup. I have 3 defenses, no backup quarterback. So my picks, on the waiver wire, depending on, how that shakes out. I mean, I'm looking at Zach Wilson, Andy Dalton, Daniel Jones, Brock Purdy, Tyler Huntley, Taylor Heineke, Sam Darnold. Like, yeesh.
It's impossible to replace Jalen Hurts, but
lastly, Cortland Sutton with the hamstring injury. Nathaniel Hackett said he's potentially available for week 16 versus the Rams, so that's all we can really note about that. Moving on to the waiver wire, we'll talk about players that you can pick up to replace Jalen Hurts, or maybe you got to replace Jonathan Taylor, or maybe you just want to stash somebody, or maybe you need a defense. So we'll talk about it. First off, some quarterbacks. Brock Purdy is only owned in 22.6% of leagues. He has Seattle and I'm sorry, he already faced Seattle. What other team does he have? He has the Washington Commanders, and he has one more. I don't remember who else he has. But he has 3 straight weeks over 14 fantasy points. I think back-to-back weeks over 16. So I do like picking up Brock Purdy if you need a quarterback. Your thoughts about that?
He does get Vegas championship week. I
Pretty
do
good
think
too.
if you are the Jalen Hurts owner, you do need to pick up Brock Purdy.
Yep.
Because the other guy we'll talk about next, but the other guy plays on Thursday Night Football, so
You would have to make that decision.
Yeah, that's not the decision you want to make.
But here's the good news. The Eagles should practice Wednesday and Thursday, then they fly out Friday. So we should have an update on Jalen Hurts as of Thursday night, I think.
We like to think. I wouldn't be surprised if he flew with the team and they made it a game.
Didn't play. Yeah. Yep. At that point, Gardner Minshew, so you're going to be your backup then. Or unless you, yeah. So Zach Wilson's the other one. He's owned in 7% of leagues. He had 23 fantasy points against the Lions, who's one of the worst defenses in the league, maybe the worst defense in the league. He probably scored just as many points as Mike White would have. So now he's facing the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had the 5th worst team against quarterbacks, surrendered the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. I mean, you're a Jet fan. Like, how do you feel about that? And I want to back Nick's point. I did see a clip yesterday of Garrett Wilson getting really frustrated after a ball like kind of flew over his head that Mike White probably would have hit. So Nick is kind of right about the receivers getting frustrated. So I don't know. I personally would not play Zach Wilson in a fantasy playoff, knowing that like I feel like there's friction in that locker room with the owner, with the coach. Like, it's not a knock on his talent, but like when there's friction over there, like I don't like it.
So I have to go. I literally can see both sides of this take, and I don't know which side I fall on. Like, I feel like you ever see those TikToks where they cut the loaf of bread and it flips on yes or no? Well, I'm the bread and it's just staying up. It's not flipping either way. So here's the argument. Great matchup. Team just allowed 34 points to Dak Prescott and company. The Jets offense isn't built like the Cowboys offense, but they do put up a lot of yards. Zach Wilson did just throw for 302 touchdowns. Very solid day overall, and you're going up against one of the worst defenses in football. On the flip side, Zach Wilson is a backup quarterback who got the starting job due to an injury to the starting quarterback. Is not the most talented guy, is not popular in the locker room. There's very good arguments for it. For me, I just wish it wasn't Thursday because it's such a quick decision.
Yeah.
And it's in prime time. Everybody is going to see your blunder or they're going to see you succeed. I did play Zach Wilson this past week in my 14-person league, and it did pay off. He did have a very solid day, but I can't see myself trusting him over some of the other guys. I mean, if you have Jalen Hurts, I'd rather wait on Jalen Hurts, and I don't like the Minshew matchup, but I'd rather risk Jalen Hurts than put out Zach Wilson on Thursday.
I mean, your other options,
Lamar, we're probably not going to know till the back half of the week.
Right. I mean, you have Andy Dalton against Cleveland, and I don't like that matchup. You have Daniel Jones against Minnesota. I actually do like that one. That might be the one right there. Brock Purdy against Washington. That one's not bad. Heineke against the 49ers, can't do that. I'm going off matchups on my waiver wire, by the way. Sam Darnold against Detroit. I mean, that might be a decent one. So
I want to look at the top defenses on the season, and I want to see who they're facing. So, because that's usually a good indicator. So we got the Patriots next week go up against Cincinnati. Would you play Zach Wilson over Joe Burrow? Absolutely not.
No.
San Francisco, they go up against Washington. Would you play him over Heineke? Absolutely. It might take a second as each of these loads.
No, that's okay.
I do want to go through a few of them because it's important. Philadelphia with Dak Prescott. I think that's a good debate right there.
I don't think so. I think you play Dak.
Last time Dak
he didn't play Philly this year. Dak's been pretty solid since he returned from the injury. I mean, since he returned from the injury, 19, 20, 14, 16, 13, 12. I mean, I know there's a couple low ones in there, but I mean, he's basically had over 16 most of his matchups.
It's gonna be that I think is a good debate. That one I think I would go either way. I'd probably lean Dak, but I wouldn't fault you for taking what's his face? The other guy.
Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I wouldn't follow you for taking Zach. The Ravens go up against Atlanta. Yeah, that's Zach. Buffalo goes up against Chicago. I would play Fields in that one.
Yeah.
Denver goes up against the Rams. Baker's not up for debate. Tampa Bay goes up against Arizona. So, I mean, most of the top defenses, it sounds like they're playing like the backup quarterbacks or guys you wouldn't even debate.
Yeah.
So, outside of Dak Prescott, I haven't really seen a quarterback that I think I would debate.
What that also means is that if you have a top defense, you're probably going to get a good chunk from your top defense. If you don't have a top defense, you're going to already be down 15 points or so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there you go. Okay, moving on to running back. Zach Moss is owned in 0.7% of leagues. He had 8 points on 24 carries. Deion Jackson had 12.6 points. He had 12 fantasy points. Owned in 12.6% of ESPN leagues, and he had 12 fantasy points. Sorry about that. Which Colts running back would you rather prioritize this week?
So they're going up against the Chargers, which is important because the Chargers have been really bad against the run.
They've been horrible with it. We always have a running back on our all boom team against the Chargers.
Yeah, they've been one of the bottom 3 for sure.
Yeah.
This past week, Derrick Henry ran right all over them. So you are going to play one of these guys. The question is, which one do you go with? Deion Jackson's been the back over there for a while. They moved Nyheim Hines we thought to give him the backfield, and then Zach Moss has double the amount of carries. It's pretty much going to be touchdown or bust for either one of these guys, so which way you want to lean. But I do think that both of them have a good case to be in your lineup. They are not going to see the 37 carries that they saw. They were up at halftime 33-0. We all know what happened in that game. I think I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I would lean Zach Moss. The fact that he had 24 carries compared to Deion Jackson, I think he's going to be the guy that they roll out there.
How did Deion Jackson score more fantasy points and maybe more receptions or something?
Touchdowns and catches.
Did he have a touchdown?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm gonna check again. I was at the Bucks game when that whole stage. Oh, I'm sorry. I was actually out. Where was I? I don't know. I was somewhere. Yeah, Zach Moss had 24 carries, 81 yards, no touchdown. Deion Jackson had 13 carries, 55 yards. Deion Jackson did have the one receiving touchdown. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you on that. So I think prioritize Zach Moss at that point. Another running back here, Tyler Algier, 33%. He's been a bit shaky, but he had 25 fantasy points against a very good New Orleans Saints defense. His next 2 defenses are the Baltimore Ravens and the Arizona Cardinals. Are you prioritizing Tyler Algier with the thought of potentially playing him?
Yeah, I think there's potential there. I mean, if he was on your bench, or if you did lose Jonathan Taylor, like I do think he is a viable option. I would prefer Zach Moss, just knowing that the volume's there. Algier does get volume as well, but there's a clear split backfield that's been there the entire year. They split it 3 ways. There's 2 starting running backs over there for the Colts. I trust the Colts to find the end zone against the easier matchup of the Chargers this week versus Algier against Baltimore, who's been a top 10 defense on the season. So I do think I will lean that way for this week, but I do think Algier is a good play. I think I would just prioritize Zach Moss on the waivers.
And lastly, Jahan Dotson, somebody that we've been high on early on in the season. I think he's eclipsed Curtis Samuel as the wide receiver too. Only owned in 23% of leagues, back-to-back weeks at over 16 fantasy points. Tough defense in San Francisco this weekend. I wouldn't play him, but then he has Cleveland as a defense I think you could play him against. So your thoughts about that?
You should absolutely roster him. If you move on to your championship, you're going to see, based on how he plays against San Francisco, that'll decide whether he's playable. I do want to give myself a little pat on the back here because I did say, watch out for the bye weeks because Jahan Dotson could jump Curtis Samuel.
Yeah,
I did say that. I want to give myself a little pat on the back for that one. But yes, Jahan Dotson, do not play him against San Francisco. If he plays well, he will be one of those guys that should start on your championship, on the lineup you roll into the championship.
Yep. Lastly, I've selected 4 defenses here that you may be able to pick up. So I'm going to take this one out. Tampa Bay against the Cardinals. I think Tampa's probably owned in most leagues, but if they're not, they're a good option as well. I have the Cleveland Browns against the New Orleans Saints, the Los Angeles Rams against the Denver Broncos, and the Denver Broncos versus the Los Angeles Rams. These are matchups based on defenses that I think are owned in most leagues, and you probably could pick up. So if you could pick up one of those defenses, which one are you rolling with?
I like that Rams Denver game, especially knowing LA is getting the short week this week. Is that game in Mile High? No, it is in LA.
I think I would like the Rams defense more with Aaron Donald, but you told me in the yesterday show that you believe he's out. So
yes, I do believe he was already ruled out for the game.
So I don't even want that Rams D at that point. If Denver's there, I'll take Denver. But if not, I mean, I'd rather have the Browns than the Rams.
The over-under for the game is 35.5. That's pretty pathetic. Yeah, I definitely would lean Denver's defense. I think Baker is going to have a nice interception fest over there. So I think Denver needs to be the number one priority. They shouldn't be. I feel like they're rostered most places, but back-to-back weeks against Kansas City allowing a lot of points. Or Kansas City, and then I think they had another game that they allowed a lot of points the week before. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they were sitting on your waivers.
Yep, I totally agree. Normally, we would end our Tuesday show with Stash or Trash. If you listen to the show weekly, that's our last segment on Tuesday. But we didn't do it this week because at this point, I think you kind of know who you're trashing, and it's not many players to pick up. But that is a segment that will return next season. I think it's a segment we both really enjoy, and I thought I saw NFL Network do a similar segment the other day. By the way,
they jacked it off the PrimeTime.
They jacked it off the PrimeTime Pod, and I'm sure other shows have did that segment as well. But that's a segment that I hadn't seen before we started doing it anyway. So I'm sure it's been done by people before. Everybody. Kind of does the same.
Everybody has a segment.
Yeah,
like
exactly. So anyway, if you enjoyed this show, hopefully you did, and you're listening on an audio streaming platform like Spotify or iTunes, please make sure you give that 5-star review and a rating of 5 stars and a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please drop a like on this video, share the links with your friends. We'd appreciate that. Keep connecting with us on social media. Like I said, PrimeTimeFFPod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube is Primetime Fantasy Podcast. We'll have one more show for you guys this week. I will actually drop it on Thursday. It's going to be a super duper show. It's going to give you injury previews for the entire weekend. It'll have a Thursday Night Football preview or all boom and all bust teams for this week 16 and our flex on them segments. That'll be a lot of fun on Thursday. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you. Talk to you soon. Talk to you on Thursday. Hopefully you hit on your waiver wire.